Okay, so I think what we'll do for colleagues on the call, we'll get started. So good morning, just have to check myself then. My name is Anne Linsell and my role today is to facilitate this session. I'm supported in the background by Robert and Louise, and also Owen from IT, who's just supported us with a few technical challenges. So this is one of our Leadership Matters conversations that we've been running since the start of the year across the system. And I'm delighted that we're joined today by Mark. And Mark is going to introduce our fantastic keynote today. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Anne. That's really kind, and good morning to everybody on the call. I'm hoping now that my children are at school, fortunately, so that's okay. There should be no children interrupting. I've put out all the flames and candles in the house far away from me, so hopefully I don't become a viral sensation anytime soon for the wrong reason. So it's my pleasure, really, today to welcome Terence to come and talk with us this morning. I know there'll be many people on the call, and there are many people that join us on catch up on these types of calls. And I really think this is testament to how we are progressing with our Leadership Matters conversations, the sort of people that we're able to secure to come and talk with us. Having read a little bit about Terence before this morning, as you'd imagine, Terence Mauri is the founder of Hack Future Lab, a global management think tank and leading management thinker who inspires leaders to thrive in the age of disruption. And we're in esteemed company, I believe, Terence. So The Economist, Forbes, BBC, Reuters, HuffPost, CNN, Wired. I mean, the list is endless. You can now add Northamptonshire Healthcare Partnership to that list.
You're making me blush, Mark.
Oh well, that's my job. That's my role. And but in all seriousness, Terence has been described as an influential and outspoken expert on the future of leadership, and having seen some of the aspects of the new 3D book, I'm really looking forward to this morning. So without further ado, Terence, it's over to you.
Thank you, Mark, for such a warm and generous welcome, and a very warm welcome to all the participants as well. I think today is a great opportunity to give you what I hope to be the equivalent of a double espresso to excite and energize your mind, and to also give you the chance to hit the strategic pause in your busy lives and reflect upon where you're heading and some of those challenges and some of those learnings as well. It's fair to say that change used to happen as a breeze. Now it feels like a Category 5 typhoon, doesn't it? Everything's changed in the last 16 months. The office changed, technology changed, people changed, our priorities changed. But lots of things have not changed. Values have not changed. Psychological safety has not changed. The importance of feeling alive and empowered at work has not changed. So today I want to give you a deep dive into how to scale the best and bravest version of you, and how to turn uncertainty into possibility. The world's more turbulent, less predictable, more complex, less simple, more infinite, less knowable. And it doesn't help that our brains are hardwired to dislike uncertainty. And so we therefore often avoid embracing it as an inflection point. My mission, my goal today is to share with you some insights, some human stories on how to harness uncertainty as a tailwind and use it to reimagine relevancy, use it to amplify what makes us feel more human, and use it to amplify our patient care outcomes as well. You see, uncertainty can come as a headwind, but I want to reject this constraint and look at some really practical, energizing ways to harness uncertainty as a tailwind for reinvention, for renewal, and for creating a greater sense of belonging and growth. And that's what life is about. If we're lucky, we get about 960 months to live. But my goal here is not to depress you, but 960 months is just 80 years of age. 8 hours is just 480 minutes. And my point is, it's never been easier to waste time, waste energy, all of these different digital distractions, which can eat up our attention. So let's get started. How do we turn uncertainty into possibility and talk into action, and knowing into doing. Let's go to our next slide. Thank you, Anne. So straight away, what questions do you want to be remembered for? I think one of the most effective, powerful tools when uncertainty is high and anxiety, anticipatory anxiety about the future is high. We're all going through that. Also a sense of loss, a loss of identity, a loss of purpose, a loss of meaning. When all of these are high, and let's face it, they're at extremely high points over this last 16 months. We've all suffered terrible loss. I think questions matter more than ever. What questions do you want to be remembered for? What's the bravest question you can ask today? Questions are like the golden key that can unlock the door and help you see the world differently. When you ask new types of questions, new questions to old problems, new questions to new problems, I think it helps you to see the world differently. It helps you to challenge outdated assumptions, outdated mental models, and helps us to reimagine. So questions are the answer. If you stop for 4 minutes every day, just take 4 minutes to think about new types of questions, to real life challenges you face, looking at ways, spotting better ways for to create patient care. Actually, that's 24 hours of new types of questions a year. So here's 5 catalytic questions that we're going to focus on now. Number 1, how do you turn uncertainty and anxiety into hope and possibility? Number 2, our life and our work increases or decreases in direct proportion to courage. In Finland, they call it Sizzle, Viking spirit. It's an alchemy of courage and daily action. So how do we choose courage over comfort in our day-to-day work, no matter what our role or job title? Number 3, don't fall in love with ideas. Fall in love with pain points, friction, challenges that our patients face. So pain points are the source of new ways of thinking, new ways of innovating, new ways of creating a more compassionate, caring, patient-centric outcomes. So how do you spot better ways of working? Question 4, it's a really big question. We need to prioritize trust. Trust is the ultimate human currency for patient care. It's the ultimate human currency for work and for relationships. So how do we unlock trust with each other, with our patients, in order to create a culture of clarity, a culture of belonging, and a culture of pride? Here, I want to introduce 2 new human metrics. Number 1 is what I call ROI, not return on investment, return on intelligence, return on integrity, return on imagination. This is how we not just meet, but exceed patient care outcomes in the 21st century. And number 2 is ROC, return on courage. Imagine every day when you can ask yourself, hold the mirror and ask yourself, what's been my return on courage today as an individual and as a team? Finally, question 5, and it's a big question. Our attention spans are under attack every day. Digital distractions, emails, text, social media. It's actually really difficult to focus, isn't it? I spoke to a doctor recently who said that the number of selfie-related accidents has gone exponential. And so we need to have a no strategy. It's impossible to focus. It's impossible to prioritize. It's impossible to do great work, not just busy work, unless you have a no strategy. And what is it that what are you going to say no to today to go 10x safer, fairer, more inclusive, more caring, more compassionate? The learning, the takeaway is questions are the answer. A really great tool to give you immediately is if you want to use catalytic questions in your day-to-day work, and this is what this session is about today, it's about practical application. I would suggest that you identify as a team, this is a great exercise to do as a team. You identify a frustration or an obstacle or a challenge. It could be a challenge that you face. It could be a challenge that your patients face. It could be a process-related challenge, a communication-related challenge. You pick one challenge And then you allocate about 10 minutes to generating new types of questions, but avoid answering them. So just generate new types of questions. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, together as a team, look at those new questions and pick 1, 2, or 3 really courageous questions that help you look at that problem in a different way, help you shift perspective, and perhaps re-energize you as well. And then finally, look at those 2 or 3 new catalytic questions and attempt to answer them with courage and clarity. This is called catalytic questions. And you can find out more if you go to 4-24project.com. Let's go to our next slide. So a couple of months ago, I received an email from an executive assistant called Amy Ingram. And the purpose of the email was to organize a meeting with her boss. When I got to meet with him on Zoom, he asked me a very strange question. What did I think of Amy's emails? What a strange question to ask. He then looked at me on Zoom, which was a bit weird, and he said, I've got a confession. Amy's not human. Amy's not human. Amy is AI, artificial intelligence. I thought it was a setup. I kept looking over my shoulder. Was I part of a Black Mirror Netflix film? What I realized is the future has already happened. So Amy Ingram, if you look at the initials, artificial intelligence. And Amy or Andrew, you can choose Amy or Andrew, they are virtual assistants. And my first reaction, as I said, was almost embarrassment because I've been having this email exchange with Amy. My second reaction was a bit of paranoia. But my third reaction was this age of wonder. And actually, I think the next 10 years is a great opportunity to make us more human. That if you can imagine that the parts of your role that take up a lot of time but are not very value creating, perhaps they're routine, they're lower value, but you have to do them. If we can kind of delegate them or augment them, you'll have even more energy and attention to focus on the highest value activities in your role, including those patient care outcomes. Let's go to our next slide. So this is the age of wonder. It's not the age of disruption, it's the age of wonder, because there's so much negativity out there right now. And I think you've got to be really careful about what are you absorbing every day. Research from Hack Future Lab shows that a sense of isolation has gone up for many. Anticipatory anxiety about the future, about work, about health, about our relationships, about the pandemic at a very high level. And this can create more fear, more anxiety. But here's an important point. Yes, uncertainty is the #1 driver of fear and doubt. But yes, also, uncertainty can be harnessed for learning and growth and discovery. Let's go to our next slide. So what do I mean by this? Well, uncertainty in 2 words means change and opportunity. And when you face change, and let's face it, we all suffer change fatigue, and this word change is overused so much that sometimes we feel viscerally tired straight away when we hear this. Change offers 2 options: renewal and reinvention, or regression. And the history of humanity is a history of change. It's a history of evolution. 100,000 years ago, we harnessed fire, which led to language. 10,000 years ago, we developed agriculture, which led to cities and commerce. 5,000 years ago, we developed writing and the wheel. And today we're at this new inflection point, this convergence of AI and technology and digitization. But you know what? The most important facet of this is elevating humanity. And to do that, we need to understand how to harness uncertainty as a tailwind, not just look at it as a headwind, as something that happens to us. Let's go to our next slide. So Let's dive into some real human stories of harnessing uncertainty as a tailwind and rejecting this constraint that it's just a headwind that happens to us. Say hello to Emma Yang. She's just 14 years old in this photograph. She's with her grandmother. And this is a really important story because every 7 minutes around the world, somebody is diagnosed with dementia. And tragically for Emma's great-grandmother, she was diagnosed with dementia. It's a ticking time bomb. According to the World Health Organization, by 2030, over 150 million people worldwide will be suffering from dementia. Now, Emma decided to harness this uncertainty. And what she's done, she's now 18 years of age, she's created this app called Timeless. And the purpose of the app is to help those with dementia to stay connected with their families. For example, it uses geotagging. So when the grandmother walks too far away, family are alerted. It uses AI to generate photographs and memories and how to stimulate conversations and create connection and that strong sense of belonging and love. You know, I hear that technology, we have a lot of hype about technology and data, but love and humanity at the core here. And when I interviewed her for my book, she drew out this incredible, only 18 years of age, she grew out this incredible cycle of discovery, this idea that uncertainty, yes, it can drive fear and doubt and anxiety, but also you can use it for learning, for discovery, for testing out new ways of doing things, spotting better ways of working that can save time for you or indeed improve outcomes in terms of care and compassion and connection for your patients. And she calls it UP. And UP stands for U, uncertainty, to P, possibility, up. I think it's a really positive way of looking at uncertainty. And we're going to look at how to scale that in our own lives today. Let's go to our next slide. Thank you, Anne. So let's do a practical activity. And for this, I'm going to invoke the spirit of the huge power of thinking like a kid. If you've got children or nieces or nephews or grandchildren, you know that we can learn a lot from our kids. And this sort of idea of the huge power of thinking like a kid sometimes. In fact, research from London Business School, from City University, from Stanford in America, it shows unequivocally that at the age of 4 or 5, our ability to be divergent, to generate possibilities, to be creative is around 96%. It's a superpower. It's a superpower. But by the age of 21, a lot of that courage, a lot of that creativity has been squeezed out of us or educated out of us. And there's a great TED talk by the late Sir Ken Robinson all about that. This sort of educating creativity and courage to take risk out of us by the age of 21. So if you look at the huge power of thinking like kids, I think there's some big areas for you to think about. And this is a key way of turning uncertainty into possibility. The power of play, the power of peers, the power of purpose, the power of projects. These are some big ones. So grab a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. And we're going to participate in perhaps one of the largest ever hackathons. And this is going to be a 3-minute activity. So pen or pencil and a piece of paper. And, sometimes as grown-ups, we create more constraints for ourselves. We become more risk averse. We find 100 reasons not to do something or not to try something. Being an expert, wearing an expert hat is important, but sometimes it's also powerful, especially when you're harnessing uncertainty, when you want to innovate on behalf of your patients. It's also important to put on a beginner's hat, because when you have a beginner's hat on, you see more possibilities than problems. You're more willing to experiment and learn and apply humility. So we're going to do a grow down activity. I want you to think vividly of somebody you've been working with over the last couple of months, somebody that you've perhaps seen quite a bit via MS Teams or Zoom. Picture their face. Just choose one person who you've been working with extensively over the last couple of months, somebody who you know their face quite well. And I want you now, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to draw, do the best drawing you can, the most Picasso-like drawing, perhaps not Picasso, do a great drawing of somebody who you work with closely, you admire, draw their face as accurately as you can. You might not be able to see them right now, but that's okay. Just imagine, visualize their face. And let's start the clock. 3 minutes to draw their face on a piece of paper. Let's go. So as you do that, focus, really visualize their face as vividly as you can. After this 3 minutes, you could also write down the name of that person if you like. If you wanted to, you could photograph the drawing afterwards and send it to them if you have a really strong relationship. If the drawing's not coming out the way you imagined or hoped for, maybe don't send the photograph, don't send the drawing. So keep focusing. 2.5 minutes to go, really drawing as vividly as you can the face of a colleague who you look at frequently on Zoom or MS Teams. I can almost feel the concentration right now coming through my screen. Okay, so final 60 seconds now, final 60 seconds. I can imagine there are some impressive drawings amongst you today. A final 45 seconds. Okay. So finishing up now this fantastic drawing of a colleague. You can write their name next to it if you wish. And as I said, as a follow-up, you can certainly share it with your colleagues if you feel like doing that. Okay, final 10 seconds. Okay, so let's put our pens or pencils down. Some of you might be smiling right now. Some of you might feel like crying right now. It's whatever your emotional state. Hopefully now we're in a more relaxed state. And the key learnings here, some key learnings for you to think about. Number one is think of this word fail. I want you to write down this word fail, F-A-I-L. Well, in this world of turning uncertainty into possibility, fail stands for from action I learn, fail. And I think it's a really positive way of looking at this world of uncertainty. So fail, from action I learn. And that really means that adopting an iterative experimental attitude is a really powerful way of turning talk into action, from moving from knowing to doing, and choosing courage over comfort in your daily work, whatever your mandate. So fail, from action. Underestimate the wearing the hat. We wear these different hats every day, don't we? Often our default hat is the expert hat, the knowing hat. But wearing the expert hat all the time can stop us from experimenting or sharing a learning or a setback or challenging. So take the courage, have the courage to also wear the beginner's hat, which looks more at possibilities than problems, which is willing to challenge existing assumptions and take smart risks that might improve outcomes in terms of your work, but also patient care as well. Don't underestimate the huge power of thinking like a kid in order to be more courageous in your day-to-day work, and practice 1 minute of daily courage. That's a great way of sort of building up this courage muscle. 1 minute, what's 1 minute of daily courage? The courage to speak up, the courage to say not yet, the courage to ask a new question, the courage to say what you think, the courage to give feedback. Our life increases or decreases in direct proportion to courage. Let's go to our next slide. Thank you, Anne. So what I want to do is now introduce you to 3 catalysts. These are 3 practical catalysts that you can scale and sustain today to help you turn uncertainty into possibility and fight complexity with simplicity as well. Catalyst number 1 is purpose, putting your purpose to work. Purpose, a bit like change and a bit like transformation, they become buzzwords, don't they? And they lose their specificity. For me, purpose means your source code for meaning, your source code for impact, your source code for contribution. Research at Hack Future Lab shows that when you are living your purpose, your levels of resilience in the face of adversity are about 3x higher. Your ability to absorb change is 2.5x higher. Also, your ability to be energized is about 4.5x higher. We know instinctively that when we're living our purpose and putting our purpose to work, actually we feel more alive. We feel more empowered. And I think that's what life is about for our patients and for ourselves. So we all know what we do. Most of us know how we do it, but only a few of us know why we do what we do. And this happened in my own life. I used to work in advertising and I was involved in some campaigns that you may be familiar with. You've Been Tangoed, for example, the Cadbury's Flake ads, and the Tropicana and Sunny Delight. Do you remember Sunny Delight? I was involved in the Sunny Delight campaign, which completely backfired when a 5-year-old snuck downstairs, opened the fridge, and drank half a litre of Sunny Delight and apparently turned orange. And that was the end of that campaign. So I used to work in advertising. And one day I was in Stratford-upon-Avon, Shakespeare's birthplace, which is where I grew up. And I was with my sister and my mother, actually. And we walked into Woolworths on the high street, which you remember Woolworths. We walked in and all of a sudden there was a big bang. And I woke up under a car. So basically this car driver lost control. He mounted the curb. He hit many people. And it was an accident, by the way. It was a terrible accident. He lost control of the car. He drove into Woolworths at speed. And all I remember is this big bang and then waking up under a car with the wheels still burning on my legs. That day, me and my family, we nearly lost our lives. And I was in hospital for about 3 months. And you know, it's really, when you're out of the building, when you're out of the office, annoyingly, that's where you have your best ideas, isn't it? It's weird. It's like most buildings are designed to make you feel tired or kind of stop you from being innovative. And when you're out of the building and you're not focused or defocused, you have great ideas. And anyway, lying on my bed, I really had it was a deep reflection about who I was, who I wanted to be, who I wanted to become, and was I living my values? And, you know, the truth is, I realized that I couldn't work in advertising anymore, and I had to renew and reaffirm my purpose. So my question to you is, what is your purpose? There are a couple of ingredients that you need to think about today, because purpose is a superpower for reducing uncertainty. Purpose is a great way of moving through uncertainty with clarity and courage. Can you articulate your purpose? Not the corporate jargon, but can you articulate why you do what you do? Because if you can, it will be a really powerful benefit. So can you articulate your purpose? Is it aspirational? Does it give you pride? Does it make you feel more alive? And a really important question, are you exceeding your purpose today? Are you meeting it, or are you falling behind on it? Because sometimes we know what our purpose is, but the complexities, the bureaucracies, the challenges of the job make it difficult to meet or exceed our purpose. And that can lead to frustration. And you know what I'm talking about. So purpose is a clarifier. Purpose is an energizer. Purpose is a simplifier. And gosh, we need that more than ever with all the complexity out there. It helps us to focus on what really matters. Purpose also helps you to say no because it acts as a filter. It helps you to choose between what matters and what doesn't when you have a strong purpose. Let's go to our next slide. Thank you, Anne. Everybody keeps saying to me that technology is the new oil or data is the new oil. Do you know what? I think attention is the new oil. Think about it. Data is just bits of information. Okay, connecting those bits of information together is knowledge. Turning that data into insights, it's important. But our human attention, I think, is what matters more than ever. And I think when you want to achieve great patient care and compassion and connection, when you want to do your best work, not just your busy work, when you want to feel more alive and empowered, your attention needs to be protected. Your attention is the most precious and limited resource. And it has a limited, it's limited, it's precious. It's the finest form of generosity you can give to anybody, including your patients. There are 3 types of attention for you to think about today, because this is key when you want to reduce uncertainty and move from knowing to doing. Number 1 is your inner attention. When's the last time you took a break and renewed yourself? I'm not saying 5 minutes. I'm talking about a walk, spending time with your family, slowing down, unplugging, having a digital detox. There are so many companies out there now that are what I call the attention extraction economy. Attention extraction economy. And what they do is they hijack our attention all day, making it very difficult to focus. So we get busier and busier. So inner attention is really important to renew yourself, resting and caring. Number 2 is other attention. Look at your colleagues, look at your patients, look at your visitors, look at your family. Our attention needs to be optimized to understand what they're going through, to show empathy and compassion. And attention number 3 is outer attention. In terms of best practices, being curious. Curiosity is a great mindset for turning uncertainty into possibility. Curiosity is the gap between what you know and what you want to know. And sometimes as we get busy and stressed and tired, our curiosity suffers. So practice daily curiosity, a new question, spotting a new way of working, finding a better way of doing something smarter, fairer, more inclusive. 3 types, triple attention. We need to protect it, prioritize it, and keep it front of mind in order to turn uncertainty into possibility. Let's go to our next slide, please, Anne. Why does all this matter? Well, as I said, purpose is a simplifier, it's an energizer, it's a clarifier, and it makes us feel more alive at work. And it's one of the most important ways of ensuring that you harness uncertainty and use it for renewal and reinvention. Here we can see some research from Hat Future Lab in partnership with London Business School. The last 16 months, we've suffered significant loss as humans. Loss of attachment, loss of territory, loss of structure, loss of identity, loss of future, loss of meaning, and loss of control. And this can create an identity crisis. It can create anticipatory anxiety about the future, and it can freeze us from taking action or moving forward. And it becomes a vicious circle of anxiety and fear and doubt, which is an innovation killer. So we need to, uncertain times require certainty of purpose. And I'd like you to take a few moments to look through these different types of losses, loss of attachment, loss of structure, loss of identity. Can you relate to these? Can you relate to these as an individual and a team? And remember, your patients and your visitors and your families are going through this as well. We're all experiencing liminality. Liminality is where you're moving from one world to another. And over the last 16 months, we've got 1 foot in one world, pre-pandemic, and we've now got 1 foot in a new world, some type of post-pandemic hybrid world, which we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. And this is known as liminality. And liminality can feel scary because it's kind of like one step off a cliff. But actually, you can also use liminality to renew yourself, to choose courage over comfort. Think about some of the biggest challenges or problems that frustrate you or stop you from doing your best work as a team and as healthcare centers. And think about what you can do to reduce or neutralize these. When you're experiencing a liminality, it's a great time for courage to go a step up in terms of courage and curiosity, which are these drivers for success. So we're all experiencing loss, and I want you to think deeply about what that means for you. And on the blue column, we've got some practical ways to focus on. So for example, with loss of attachment, who am I connected to in this new world? Well, we need to feel more connected, more bonded, more secure, and more included. And that means how you communicate, what you communicate. We need to go bigger on solidarity, on connection, compassion, on micro connections every day, even more so in a Zoom or MS Teams environment. Let's look at another example, loss of structure. Well, what that means for you is we need to feel more important, more valued, not in terms of arrogance, but more clarity of purpose about what we do and why it matters, more involved. And this is about we, not me, and more valued, and understand that we're living our values as well. And we should be vulnerable. Being vulnerable, showing vulnerability is how we speak up, is how we challenge, and it's how we elevate what makes us human. By the way, you'll get a copy of these slides, and this is a really useful tool to look at in more detail. A great exercise, reaching out to Anne, for example, here, and any of you who are interested in really activating these practical tools to help people reduce uncertainty, feel more empowered, feel more courageous. This is a great activity to get people to identify, self-identify with their losses, but also then move on to solution focus and say, okay, what do we need to do more of, or stop doing, or do differently to feel more courage and to feel more empowered in a world where, let's face it, uncertainty is at peak levels. Let's go to our next slide. So I mentioned anticipatory anxiety, and as I said, the research coming out, 83% of us in the UK are experiencing this. This means anxiety, heightened anxiety about the future. It could be jobs, it could be our well-being, it could be our families, it could be a recession, it could be change, it could be so many reasons, all combined together. And anxiety can be the enemy of progress. And so reducing uncertainty and turning uncertainty into possibility is also about solidarity. It's about, I call it Ubuntu. This is an African word, which I discovered once in Kenya. Ubuntu, I'm going to write it down for you. It's a great word, and I think a great value. It means I am because we are. I am because we are. And I think we've never needed Ubuntu as much as we do right now. So let's say it all together. Ubuntu. Okay, let's go to our next slide. So final thoughts on catalyst number one. Remember, catalyst number one is putting purpose to work, and it's a superpower for turning uncertainty into possibility and knowing to doing. Here we have Paul Linley. He's the founder of Ella Kitchens. If you've got kids, you know Ella Kitchens. They do the baby food. And he used to work as a finance director in TV, so no experience of baby food. When I got to meet him, he shared a really interesting story, because one day he was having breakfast with his daughter, Ella, who was 5 years old at the time. And he realized that baby food was really boring. It was plain, the packaging wasn't fun, it was so functional. And this became his calling in life. And despite his family and especially his wife saying, please don't leave your job, He decided to quit his secure, well-paid job in finance and set up Ella Kitchens. But don't fall in love with ideas, fall in love with pain points. Think about the different pain points that you face. Could be process-related pain points, meetings pain points, collaboration pain points. That's where the innovation or the way of spotting better ways of working lies. And for Paul Lindley, this became his calling. So he set up Ella Kitchens. That was over 10 years ago. And he said to me, embrace uncertainty as a tailwind, reject it as a headwind. And that's what you can do today. And what it means is, in terms of some practical takeaways, is make a decision. Choose to step up. So challenging the status quo, taking smart risks, and looking for better ways of working more inclusively, fairer, smarter, more caring, more compassionate. Specifically, it means smarter questioning. I spoke about catalytic questioning before. New types of questions for old problems, new types of questions for new problems. Observing. Remember, when we are living in the moment, when we're fully present, our ability to observe, to spot blind spots is better. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist, says we are blind to our own blindness. Every organization on the planet has blind spots. And sometimes when we're busy, when we're stressed, our primitive instincts take over, our perspective narrows, and we miss the blind spots. And those blind spots can become emergencies for our patients, for example. So observation, being fully present in your day. Networking, not in that kind of cringy sense, but connecting with others. This is about co-creating a future. Let's forget about command and control. The future is unbossed. It's projects to functions. It's hierarchies to networks. And it's about command and control moving to care and compassion and co-creation. And finally, experimenting. I think that's a great way, safe, cheap experiments to look at better ways of working, smarter, more fair, caring, more inclusive, that can really help you create a culture of high return on integrity and high return on courage. And by doing those practical day-to-day building blocks of turning uncertainty into possibility, you'll feel more energized, more resilient in the face of adversity. In fact, more anti-fragility. Anti-fragility means that you don't just bounce back, but you bounce forward as well. Let's go to our next slide. So, catalyst number one, put your purpose to work, and some reflection questions for you to photograph, to take away, to really keep the momentum after this talk today. And there's 3 strategies for you to think about that I'd like you to think about. One, as I share these insights and stories and takeaways, do you, 1, watch closely? Number 2, does it inform the way you work, your leadership? Or 3, do you need to take decisive action today? 2 important questions for you to reflect upon. How are you working differently during this pandemic that you can take forward? And number 2, what learnings or new muscles can you introduce to continue to scale a future that's resilient, courageous, sustainable, and inclusive? That's catalyst number 1, put purpose to work. Let's jump to catalyst number 2. We're going to go to slide 2 now. Next slide. Okay, so catalyst number 1, really important catalyst for turning uncertainty into possibility is purpose. Catalyst number 2 is trust. I define trust as a confident relationship in others. It's at the heart of every action, relationship, and trust is the ultimate human currency. Money is the currency of transactions. Trust is the currency of relationships. And I think we need to rethink trust today. Rethink trust, digital, ethical, personal, emotional, physical. Let's go to our next slide. The reason I say that is that we're suffering from record levels of truth decay. Looking at research from Edelman, a consultancy, trust in media, trust in business, trust in organizations, Trust in technology is at record lows. George Orwell, the writer, would have relished these times. We have meme warfare, data breaches, cybercrime, digital skullduggery, and the list goes on. Boeing Max 737, VW Gulf emissions, FIFA, McKinsey opioid crisis. So I believe that we're suffering from major levels of truth decay, not everywhere, but significantly in many places. And so we need to rebuild trust, protect it, prioritize it, put trust at the forefront of your purpose and the way that you work, because it's one of the key drivers of turning uncertainty into possibility. Because when we have high levels of trust and when our patients have high levels of trust in us, that creates a win-win outcome. Trust allows us to make trust leaps into the unknown, helps us navigate complexity, and helps us put faith in other people. Let's go to our next slide. Edge of ethics. Many organizations are working at the edge of ethics. Here we have Elizabeth Holmes. She was a young founder in the US who created this organization called Theranos. Their big, bold claim was that they invented this new blood testing machine. And she achieved incredible success very quickly. But the whole idea was based on a lie. And right now, as I speak, she's going through the courts. Theranos, the company that she created, was valued at over 10 billion US dollars at its highest peak. But the whole idea was based on a lie, because the blood testing equipment, this new innovation, did not work. It was false. And here we can see the importance of psychological safety and psychological danger. That when you want to reduce uncertainty and turn uncertainty into possibility and uncertainty into action, you've got to create high levels of psychological safety, because that becomes an early warning signal, an early warning system for people, patients, colleagues to speak up about anxieties, speak up about concerns, challenge status quo, share ideas, and have debates. And that's how we make progress. That's how we innovate on behalf of our patients. And that's how we make our lives easier. And what I mean by that is more effective, more empowered, and more alive. Let's go to our next slide. So a couple of reflection points here. Catalyst number 2 is all about trust, protecting it, scaling it, even measuring it, and putting it front and center. Trust should be your North Star alongside all these other metrics that we are accountable to. Here we have a lady called Mary Barra. She's one of the only female CEOs working in the automotive industry. And she's on a mission to make automotive industry net carbon zero by 2030. When I interviewed her, she spoke about 4 foundations of trust, which is at the heart of managing uncertainty and at the heart of relationships and innovation. She said there are 4 buckets. Number 1 is your competence and your reliability. That's how you do things as an individual and as a team and as a healthcare center. Number 3 and 4 is integrity and empathy. And that's why you do things, why you do what you do. Really important. Empathy. We hear a lot about empathy. There's a great empathy test you can do in the future. Next time you go into a lift, when somebody is approaching 20 meters away, do you 1, keep that door open for them? Or do you 2, hit the close button as quickly as you can so it closes just before they arrive? It's a really simple, practical empathy test, because when we're busy, when we're stressed, when we feel overburdened, often it's the compassion and empathy that suffer first. Let's go to our next slide. I mentioned Ubuntu. I am because we are. And the truth is, diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. Here we have research showing that when you've got that rich diversity, so psychological safety high, cognitive diversity high, cultural diversity high, and all those different types, neurodiversity high, you create what I call a super team, much richer perspectives, more courage in the face of adversity, and also more fun to be part of. This is the difference between an effective team and an ineffective team. So I want you to think about this action, this imperative, this priority. What are you doing to unlock Ubuntu in your own teams to ensure that you have diversity and inclusion, and you get the richest, most shared sense of belonging and contribution? This, by the way, will also scale the trust, which becomes your second superpower. Let's go to our next slide. So we're about to finish off on catalyst number 2, which is trust is your North Star. We should be prioritizing it every day to navigate problems, navigate uncertainty, placing faith in our patients and then placing faith in others, and ensuring that we take trust leaps, which is finding better ways or smarter ways or fairer ways, more caring ways to improve the experience for our patients. Big questions for you to reflect on and take away today. Think about the qualities you're bringing and what you could be as well as what you could do. So what do you feel you could be more of or less of to elevate your own human potential? And how practically should you hold each other to account in order to turn talk into action? I think a big point here is the attention. As I said, I really believe that our attention spans are under attack every day. And it's very difficult to prioritize and make things happen when when our default state is distraction, rush cultures, a culture of immediacy. And sometimes we're our own worst enemies. I mean, from my own experiences, I think sometimes we expect immediacy from each other, but then that squeezes the time to be able to think deeply. Here's a question, how much time do you spend on shallow work versus deep work? Shallow work versus deep work. Cal Newport at MIT, he writes a lot about this because 80% of our time is normally on shallow work, but rather than deep work. So attention is absolutely key. I think attention applies to all of these catalysts, that if we're not fully present, it's very difficult to turn these headwinds into tailwinds if we're not feeling, we're not thinking, we're not being. And the truth is, I think sometimes a lot of leadership is unthinking, automated, unfeeling. And I think the pandemic actually has been a great catalyst for making us more compassionate, more caring in the truest sense. Let's go to our final, next slide, Anne. We'll come to our final 6 minutes. Okay, so catalyst number 3, the final catalyst of my talk today, which is all about turning uncertainty into possibility. Well, the final catalyst is courage. Think about anybody in your life. They could be living or passed away. The chances are, if you admire them, they probably had some type of courage. Courage is the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Oliver Sacks, the late psychiatrist, said, great cultures, great teams have 3 secrets. 1, they're always in a state of becoming. That means that they're learning and unlearning and relearning, a state of becoming. I'm going to write that down for you. Number 2, Oliver Sacks said, we need to have a high sense of belonging. Ubuntu. And number 3, believing. And Oliver Sacks, the psychiatrist, said that when you've got these buckets in place, a state of becoming, learning and learning, relearning, curiosity, a feeling of belonging, it's about we, not me, and a state of believing. This creates the pride. Actually, when you've got these 3 buckets in place, you turn uncertainty into possibility. It becomes a tailwind rather than a constraint or a threat. Let's go to our next slide. So say hello to Georgina Harwood. She has this Sizzle Spirit Remember I mentioned the Finnish word sisu. It means Viking spirit. She faces adversity. She steps into the unknown. She takes trust leaps. And her favorite motto is ancora imparare. You may have realized that I'm Italian. I was actually born in Italy, but I grew up in the UK. And as a side note, that makes my life complicated. Sometimes my hand starts doing this. If you can do this right now, you're half fluent in Italian. Well done. And her saying, Georgina's saying is ancora imparare, which means, yes, I am still learning. What a great attitude. She's a learner, not a knower. She was born in 1921. Not a great year to be born, just after the First World War and the Spanish flu, which took over 50 million lives around the world. And in the 1920s, there was terrible disruption. But, you know, when there's disruption, there's also possibility. You find when you look at nature and look at history, that when we go through high levels of disruption, it's often high levels of renewal and reinvention as well. Think about the 1920s, the invention of film, penicillin, radio, airplanes. And so the question we need to ask ourselves today is, do we watch the world change around us, or do we take a role in being part of that? Do we watch the world change around us, or do we say, do you know what? I'm going to take part in that. And for her, she decided that she was going to be a participant, not an observer of change. Her dream was always to study English literature at university, but she never had the opportunity. And at the age of 83, she had a family meeting, and she announced to the family that she was going to study English literature. The family tried to put her off, but when you've got a strong purpose, it gives you clarity of direction and courage of spirit. And she got her way. And she was very nervous. She thought she might get rejected from university. But about 3 months later, she opened her letter, she got accepted. And she completed a 3-year bachelor's in English literature. And when she graduated, she was twice as old as the professor. Now, you'd think that'd be the end of the story. But a few years later, at the age of 88, she had another family meeting. You can imagine the pressure levels of the family at this point. And she said to them, I want to do a master's. They tried to put her off, but she was determined. And she did a master's. And during that time, she had a terrible stroke as well, but she survived. She had the Sizzle Spirit. This is her at the age of 100, celebrating her 100th birthday. And she's about to do a parachute jump twice. And when I interviewed her, I said to her, what's your secret? And she said, be a learner, not a knower, and choose courage over comfort. And I said to her, what do you want to do for your next birthday? And she smiled at me and she whispered, if I'm lucky and if I'm alive, I want to swim with great white sharks in South Africa. I didn't say that. I didn't share that with the family. Ancora imparare. Yes, I'm still learning. What a great spirit, a great attitude to adopt in your day-to-day work on behalf of your patients. Let's go to our next slide. So courage DNA is who you are and who you want to be. And I think there are 4 big actions for you to think about today. It starts with self-compassion, self-understanding. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. We allow the inner critic, the gremlin, to sabotage us every day. And in this 16 months of terrible loss and tragedy, it's easier than ever to become depressed and helpless. So self-compassion. Focus on small daily wins. There's so much focus on being bold and thinking big, but actually I think small differences every day is what matters. 1 minute of daily courage, for example, the courage to speak up, the courage to share an idea, the courage to share a challenge, status quo. Consistency. Consistency is the difference that makes the difference. And finally, patience. It sounds counterintuitive when we're told to rush and speed is king, but I truly believe that to achieve really great patient outcomes and to create environments where we feel more alive and more human, we also need to slow down, focus on deep work, not just shallow work. Let's go to our next slide. Some final thoughts, and this is a great tool to take away today. I call it the courage accelerator. And it's a great way of harnessing uncertainty as a tailwind and rejecting it as a headwind. I call it, so we've got learner courage, collaborator courage, challenger courage, and inclusion courage. And these are 4 building blocks of choosing courage over comfort. And my recommendation is that you look at this tool after today and look at the accelerators of courage. And you can do this as a great team exercise to say, okay, where do we need to step up or start showing more courage? But also, what's stopping us from being showing that courage and curiosity in our day-to-day role? So learner courage, collaborator courage, challenger courage, and inclusion courage. And together they create the safety to be your true human self and to fight complexity with simplicity and achieve high return on courage. Let's go to our next slide. Final few moments now. Another challenge we face, especially with courage, is what I call the BMI challenge. Not body mass index, not body mass index. I call this bureaucratic mass index. Bureaucratic mass index. Hands up if you feel that there's too much bureaucracy in what you do. The chances are 88% of people would agree and say, yes, we suffer from, thank you, Jill. We suffer from excess bureaucracy. And here's the paradox. We're drowning in bureaucracy despite the agile movement. Excess bureaucracy is costing organizations around the world over £9 trillion a year. Imagine what that could do to healthcare outcomes for the NHS, for healthcare centers, social care, if we could reduce excess bureaucracy. Here we can see research that shows that the challenge and the paradox. If you have a team of 4 people, that's 6 different lines of communication. If we jump to 8 people, that's 28 different lines of communication. To give you a concrete example, we're drowning in complexity. If you think about how much the processing microchip has increased since the 1950s, it's over 1 trillion times. Now ask yourself how much your brain processing power has increased. Hasn't changed. I went to HSBC recently and I discovered, this is top secret between you and me today, that internally, HSBC, it stands for, wait for this, how simple becomes complicated. HSBC, how simple becomes complicated. I know, you can't make this up. They've just reduced 44,000 job titles to 20,000. And like most big organizations, growth creates complexity, but complexity can kill success. Complexity can kill innovation. And innovation and bureaucracy are like oil and water. So we need to focus on a couple of actions here, which are absolutely key to courage over comfort. Simplifying, streamlining, optimizing, and eliminating the unnecessary. These are big building blocks to fight complexity, not with complexity, but with simplicity. Let's go to our next slide. Now, a short story, Novartis, they decided to fight complexity with simplicity. And they created a 1-month hackathon, which they call Unbossed. This idea that rather than hierarchies and bureaucracy, create an unbossed movement where people own their work, they feel truly empowered to be able to change their outcomes on behalf of themselves and their patients. And this 1-month hackathon really looked at all types of different learnings to create more curiosity around the world, but also turn uncertainty into opportunity. It's called Unbossed, and you can look at it in more detail after my talk. Let's go to our next slide. So, some final reflections. My goal today was to give you the equivalent of a double espresso, very important as an Italian, and to energize your thinking, get you thinking differently, and get you thinking about these 3 buckets. Becoming, what do you want to become as an individual, as a team? Believing, what do you believe in? And belonging. Big questions for you to think about today. Where do you aspire to be better, 10x higher, safer, more patient-centric? What beliefs or long-held assumptions need challenging or appending? And what do you need to say no to or stop doing to create the cognitive bandwidth? You remember, when we reply to those emails, when we get distracted on our mobiles, when we're going into Zoom or MS meetings one after the other, you pay a cognitive tax. It's more difficult to focus, more difficult to be creative, and you spend your time just recovering from the interruptions. It's very difficult to be innovative and courageous when we're just on a default of faster, faster, faster. Let's go to our next slide. So it's your move next. In Japanese, there's a word called henka, and it means continuous evolution. And I really like this word. Instead of this word change or this kind of, so being in this perpetual state of beta, yes, thinking and learning, but also rethinking and unlearning. Henka. It's like a moth to a butterfly or lead to gold. It's evolution, transcendence. I think that's capturing that spirit as an individual and a team can do wonders for making us feel more alive and achieving the best possible patient outcomes. Let's go to our final slide. I wanted to give you some really practical tools as well today. Here's 6 great ones that you can use as teams or individuals to scale cultures of courage, to practice daily courage, to spot better ways of working or innovating, to generating catalytic questions, to increasing psychological safety, and even having your own AI leadership coach. It's called bunch.ai, and it's a really interesting tool, and they're all free to use as well. You've also got a tool on there called Humanocracy, which can actually help you measure your BMI score, Bureaucratic Mass Index. And that's a really useful exercise to look at. Let's go to our next slide. Your time is precious. Don't waste it. Don't get trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't allow the noise of other people's voices to drown out your own life. Most importantly, have the courage to get started. Now, it's not the time for status quo. It's time for action. The courage to speak up, the courage to say no, the courage to challenge, the courage to eliminate the unnecessary, the courage to bring your best and boldest self, and the courage to turn uncertainty into possibility. I'll leave you with the words of the late Nobel laureate Marie Curie. She said, in life, nothing is to be feared, only understood. And the more you understand, the less you will fear. Let's go to our final slide. Thank you very much for having me today. And please stay in touch via LinkedIn. I'd love to continue the conversation with you. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Terence. There was so much. I mean, my notepad in front of me is absolutely littered with comments and phrases.
Hasn't gone on fire, has it?
No, it hasn't gone on fire, and I have to say, I love the analogy of the beginner's hat and the expert hat. And there was, my drawing of my colleague. Well, it's before beginner, but thank you so much. That was so powerful. But I'm conscious that we're a little over time, so I'm going to ask my colleague Mark just to come on to say a few words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Terence. Yeah, mine too. The drawing's definitely gone on to page 2. I'm not looking at that any longer. But there were some really insightful pieces there, Terence. The uncertainty is a tailwind in the whole Ella's kitchen, and that is something I'm very, very familiar with in our personal circumstances at the moment. And I really, really embrace the say no strategy. It's really important. It's pile on more and more and more demands.
And what is it that we are going to, how are we going to, I really like the idea of rescuing our attention. That's really, that really resonated with me. It was, as did lots of items, and I'm sure many colleagues on the call did too. So I suppose it's left me to say a huge thank you for sharing, a huge thank you for sharing. So many words from across the world. So many words from across the world, Terence, that you have picked up on your journey, which is really great for you to share them with us, and their meaning and their thought process behind them. They are really powerful, and yeah, the Viking spirit Sisu, that will stay with me as well for a long time. So thank you very much this morning. I hope our colleagues on the call really enjoyed it. I'm sure we have your details, so if we can send any questions
please do.
Fantastic. And yeah, I wish you every success and look forward to seeing you again, hopefully sometime.
Thank you for having me, Mark, and thank you, Anne, as well.
Yeah, thank you, Terence. It's been amazing. So just a reminder for colleagues on the call, we are going to have a little break for August, so we're not running any Leadership Matters conversations in August, but we are starting back in September. And if you check out our Eventbrite page, you can see all the information on there. And they're going to be a little bit different in September, so some exciting stuff to come. But thank you all very much for everything that you do. As I put in the chat, we will be sharing Terence's slides in the chat, and you will be able to catch up on the system website as well. And certainly for me, I think I need to go back and just re-listen to get some of those. I didn't expect to get so many new words in 1 hour. So thank you, Terence. But thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your Thursdays and Tuesdays even, and stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone. Take care.